Auburn Police Department, City Ambulance Building renovation update by Timothy Bivens, architect at Barton & Judas. Welcome back.
Mayor, City Manager, Councilors, thank you for having me. Tim Bivens with Barton & Judas. We were asked to come in and give you an update on the Auburn Police and Ambulance renovation project. So we're going to give you an overview of what we've done so far. Maybe. Just as a brief outline, I'm going to talk about existing conditions at the facilities. Some of you have probably been there, maybe not. The building was built in 1930. Not many renovations have taken place in that facility over the years, and some of these pictures will show the conditions of the building. We're also going to, we went through and determined what usable space there is in the facility. We'll talk about that. And then we've done in-depth programming for both police and ambulance separately to see what their needs are for space and utilization in the facility. And then the final piece, we'll talk a little bit about our findings and how they impact use of the building. So the renovation of the project was really intended to see how police and ambulance would use the facility, but it was important to show these photographs to show existing conditions around the outside of the building and really what hasn't taken place in quite some time. So if you look at the upper left-hand three photos up here, you can see the original wood windows, and those are actually wood window sills, and they're all in pretty deteriorated conditions. The upper right-hand corner is a photograph of the apparatus bay. You can't see it too well in the photograph, but a lot of that fascia and cornice, which is beautiful woodwork, needs a lot of refinishing, painting, needs some tender loving care. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner existing doors, wood frames, some metal canopies and structures. And then the middle photographs are more site-related, deteriorated walls, some fencing, a lot of sidewalk and curbs that are cracked and deteriorated. And the photo to the right in the bottom right-hand corner is showing some cracking. Several of these photos actually show that. A lot of differential movement here and there, but repointing, brick refinishing needs to take place. The upper 2 or 3 photographs on the left, that's your main entrance at the far left. You can see a little bit of white staining, doesn't show up great in these photographs because of the size, but there is some water penetration in the walls. Some of that is done to some cornices and stuff that just haven't been maintained, but that is getting into the walls, causing some damage. The downspout photograph in the middle, there's moss and some staining on the wall that's evident from water leakage. Again, the upper right-hand corner is some expansion cracks that are there. Again, repointing, brick refinishing. And most of the bottom photographs are finishes or deteriorated finishes, everything from the steps and the columns. The overhead doors are starting to chalk. The wood frames are, getting deteriorated, need some replacement or some updates. And I'm providing some interior photographs. I don't want to get into details of all the spaces just because of the sensitivity of what's in the building. But these slides that you see on this presentation here are related to the police department. Again, the original portion of the building, which is the building to the left, leftmost portion of the building. A lot of doors and hardware are original, not accessible. Records windows are not ADA accessible. Storage is a big concern for police. Inadequate storage is what I should say. They are surviving in what they have and trying to use every space they can, but it is tough to utilize. There's storage, or their safety equipment or exercise room in the basement is actually right next to a highly electrical generator service disconnect, which it shouldn't be, but again, they're using space. The upper right-hand corner is the attic space of the easternmost section of the building, which is ambulance. It's a trussed space, again, not accessible, difficult for storage use. And then the lower 3 or 4 photographs are the existing locker rooms that staff is using. And you can see what those look like, especially the women's shower, which is the lower second right there. The photograph that's third from the right in the lower here is actually the restroom stalls, and you can see head clearance issues with piping in that level. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then meeting space is inadequate. It's small and doesn't really, it's not conducive to the use of the space, but they use it best they can. These photographs are more related to the ambulance side of the building, the bunk area, the day room. Provided some upper middle photographs, existing doors and conditions. You know, like I said, it's quite vintage. There is the upper right second most photograph is an unprotected stair. That is the only means of egress technically from the second floor of this space. It is unprotected. It's not an enclosed stair, and it actually enters into a higher hazard, so that's an issue. The upper right-hand photograph is actually the control room or radio room. You can see the deteriorated cabinetry and the limited space. I think there's only about 30 inches between the wall and the casework. Lower left, restroom facilities, storage, IT and technology services that they're trying to utilize in spaces that are inadequate, doors and accessibility. And then there's other training spaces. You can see the training space really is inadequate. They're using an old room that's upstairs. So really they're just trying to reuse an existing building that exists, but it doesn't really meet everybody's needs program-wise. The next 2 slides I want to talk a little bit about. I showed you the photograph of headroom clearance in the basement. This red area indicated on this floor plan is really by code unusable, or what the code would say, unoccupiable space. Head clearance throughout this area ranges anywhere from 6'6" to 6'11", where the code actually says it should be 7'6". And that's everything from ductwork, piping, roof leaders and drainage, conduiting, and I'll show some photographs of that in a minute. But they are using that space, but technically it is not viable by code. This slide is of the 3rd floor of both ends of the building. The left side is the police and the right side is what is above the ambulance. The left side again is a trussed area, very low structure, head clearance issues, and the right hand side is a trussed area up in the roof that they do use for storage, but it is non-accessible for ADA. And it also does not meet egress travel distance. So these series of photographs are really going to speak to a lot of the head clearance issues that I just spoke about. The upper 3 photographs, you can see the yellow structure. For the most part, they're right around 6 foot. So you have to duck around that. It's used primarily for storage purposes, but it is really inadequate space. The second photo from the upper right is the 3rd floor above ambulance, and you can see the roof truss system. You have to step over these trusses, which is, again, not accessible space. And then the rest of these photographs, which this gentleman was happy enough to help me when I went through and took these, are of the basement area throughout the basement area. You can see he's about 6'2", and his head is just touching the roof structural beams that are there. And the bottom lower photographs, you can see all of the piping, conduits, ductwork. The far right photo, you can actually see his head is actually higher than the ductwork. So based on that, we went through and analyzed, what is usable space in the building that we could, occupy. And what we come up with is about 12,700 square feet on the 1st floor, and about 800 or 8,400 square feet on the 2nd floor. So about a total of 21,000 square feet in the building is occupiable. The next two slides are going to talk about, I abbreviated these a little bit just so that we could talk quickly about them, but programming needs, we went through a series of discussions with chief and staff and city council just to review what the program needs were. And the police needs about 41,000 square feet to facilitate all of their program needs. So when we look at, we just had in the last slide of 21,000 square feet, the facility really only suits about half of the program needs for police. Ambulance, again, we did detailed programming with them. They're right around 20,000 square feet for programming needs for their growth and utilization in the facility. So based on that, they're right on target for using the facility. So findings and summaries based on some of the things that we just looked at. When we talk about ambulance, the current location, centrally located in the city, within their central call area, good location. The original facility was constructed as a fire facility to begin with. So it's similar use. The apparatus bays are conducive to the use for the ambulances, more so than for police. And the ambulance program needs fit the usable area of the building well. We just saw that where their program is about 20,000 square feet and there's about 21 or 22,000 square feet, which allows them to have a little bit of future growth. Police, their program needs don't fit in the building. Their program needs right now are about twice their usable area that's available in the building. In addition to that, exterior parking is very limited for the department staff vehicles, equipment, and there's no provisions for any secure outdoor storage or vehicles. Major reconstruction would be necessary to suit the department and wouldn't fulfill their program needs because of size. And this is based on, again, the existing apparatus bay doesn't really meet their program needs. They do need a sally port, but they don't need all that apparatus bay, which would have to be built out. And configuration of the existing building would require separation of all their departments between floors, much like it is now, which makes it difficult in the building, and it's not ideal for staff interaction, functional operation, or by the department, or accessibility to the public. Recommendations. So at this point, based on size and program needs, the best recommendation is ambulance, repurpose the entire building for use for ambulance. Programming and space needs align with the existing building, its original intended use, what's it want to be used for now, and their program size. Police department, I would probably recommend that we look for an alternate site location for the police department. Probably recommend doing a study, maybe looking at 2 or 3 options for site locations for the city department, for the police department, that better aligns with their program needs and size. That could be city-owned property, it could be purchased property for a new building, or it could be lease space options. But that's really what should be done, is to study how do we get their program needs to fit in a facility that is conducive to their needs. And notable construction or reconstruction items, like I said, the building really hasn't seen major renovations in the last 50 years. There has been some reconstruction projects, but you can see from the vintage of the photos that is pretty original. Several areas of the building are what we would consider pre-existing non-conforming. They don't meet the current code standards of today. That's both by ADA accessibility and other things. And with a capital reconstruction project, things we were probably going to have to look to do for the building is probably add a fire suppression system or a sprinkler system. This is for fire separations, exit travel distance requirements, and for separation of uses. We have to look at providing second means of egresses from all spaces in the building, which could potentially meet a new stair tower, and potentially putting an elevator to meet accessibility requirements. And that is the bulk of my presentation, and I'm open to discussions you might have.
Council, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your thorough presentation. In your study probably wasn't involved in the scope. Had you looked at any of the research that was done based on the public safety initiative that Auburn, the city, had conducted?
Like 5 or 7 years ago? Yes, we did, absolutely, sir.
And I mean, this also may be, Ms. Selvig may want to be involved in the conversation. Were there any sites that were like, because I want to be ahead of the curve as far as, were there any sites that we recognize as potential? Because I don't know, do we have to start from scratch? Can we use some of that research? Ms. Selvig?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So this is, as far as we've come to date with the newest information about where we're at with the building usage, having 2 departments in there again. We can go back to the 2014, 2015 work that we had done. We do have site information. There has been some development in the city since then, so we can reuse maybe some of that. But I would like to start fresh, looking at, what's available, working with CETA, because I know that they have their own site selection kind of programming going for business development as well. So I don't want to have too much overlap and have that cause issues. So, but yes, we can use some of the older information.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else? Council, please.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Bivens, thank you for the presentation. This is really the first time the public's heard of, I guess, this project as a whole. And this is something that we've been, I guess, working on in the background for a long time. The first step was relocating the fire station due to the fact that the floor could not sustain the fire apparatus, and due to the fact that there was available funding for relocating the fire station through the state and federal government. I guess this realization is new to us that, we're going to have 2 facilities. So, we've, I guess, my summation is here, we have a lot of work to do. And, I'm wondering in what phases that happens. Do we relocate the police department first? Does the police department have to be centrally located like the fire station is? Does that limit the scope of where the police station can be and what's available to us? Could we have a main police station on one end of town and then maybe have a substation in this existing building? And, we don't have to answer these questions now. These are just the things that are popping up in my mind as I'm watching this. So
we have spoke to some of that internally. The one benefit over police as opposed to ambulance is ambulance calls from the station. Police is out on patrol all the time, so they have cars that are out there. So there is a little more flexibility to relocation for them.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Council Castro, please.
Is selling that property an option?
It's potentially an option. I know the question has come up in the past related to how we came about owning that property. We have looked into that in the past. It is a possibility, yes.
Does anybody have a value, just roughly what that property's worth?
We'd have to look back, and the last we looked into that was certainly before the major changes we've seen here in the last 18 months. So I don't know what the market value of that would be currently.
Okay, thank you.
Is that something that staff could do internally for us?
We could probably have the assessor's office work on some of that and see if we can find some comparables along with the realtor that we're working with and things like that. See what the market looks like out there.
Because I'm sitting here thinking, and what Councilor Castro said, got the gears turning a little bit. Maybe we would be better off if we had the opportunity to sell that building and have it repurposed by a private entity, and starting from scratch for the police and ambulance. That may be a more affordable option for us. So if staff could come up through the assessor's office or whatever, what the market value of that building is being on the waterfront. I'd be interested in seeing that as well.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
That's fine.
Counselor.
I also want to, this is, like Counselor Giantino, was surprised, not surprised, but surprised. I guess I'm wondering, what might this do to our current capital improvement plan? So obviously, it's going to be radical. So, so we may need an update on that to just kind of like, I guess, see how this impacts what we've already been discussed.
Certainly.
Counselor, please.
Counselor Cuddy, no pickleball courts, so don't think about it.
Mr. Bivens, I spent many years of my younger life working out of that building. I had dark hair, believe it or not. Well, whenever we came up with an idea to firefighters into our union about remodeling, doing something, we kept hearing about deed restrictions. So is there anything to you or Mr. Garland, is there anything to that or anything? I think it was a stall by City Hall, to be quite honest with you. But
Was it relative to like a building addition or something, or restriction in the deed, or what you could do with the building?
It depended on what the discussion was about, it would
I guess
fit
we
in.
have to pull the deed. And if it, I can't answer that question. I hadn't heard that before, but we certainly can look into it.
In the other item that we always heard about too was the proximity to the outlet. There was always a concern about underground streams or whatever feeding the outlet. I know the outlet now, the walls are all concrete and so forth, but that was always a concern, and that was part of the thought, what was wrong with the building. So I'm just, I'm not telling you to do, we're just suggesting maybe we should.
Yeah, the building, I mean, structurally, I don't have any concerns with the building. The building's even at its age, is in very good shape. A lot of the cracking you see in some of the brick and stuff is because when buildings were built back then, they didn't put control joints, so just thermal expansion, it's going to happen. But relatively speaking, the building is in good shape. The envelope needs to be taken care of. The windows and doors are bad. There's things that need to be taken care of, but structurally, the building's good. You did have issues with fire trucks and the heavy pumpers and stuff that were in there. The building was reinforced for that. If the building was repurposed for ambulance, the ambulances are certainly a lot less in weight, so that's not a concern either. So as far as the building and the site, I don't have any reservations. I mean, it's a beautiful building. It is historic, and we have to deal with those elements as we improve the building, especially if we did windows and other things, but it is a beautiful building.
No question. Counsel.
When I was new on council, Chief Slayton took me on a tour, a thorough tour of that building, and it's bringing me back to that tour, and I'm glad to see us discussing this today, because really, they should not be working in some of those conditions.
Yeah.
So, appreciate it. It's a good presentation.
Yeah, and if
Thank
we
you.
would like counsel, or I know we can't do everybody because of a quorum, but if there is an interest of having a tour, be happy to have a walkthrough and at least show you what existing conditions are.
Thank you.
Yep.
All set, Counselor? Thank you.
Yes.